Hello, everybody, and welcome to the International Church Podcast. I'm here today with Tim Faulkner, who is the new secretary or general secretary, I'm thinking in French, general secretary of the International Baptist Convention. I've been wanting to get him, he's been on the show before, and I've been wanting to get him back for a while. In fact, we tried to record about 2 months ago, and then there was some complications, and then lots of things happened. Christmas happened. My wife and I got COVID. Lots of fun things. But during that time, Tim has moved to Germany. He's in language school. Welcome, Tim, and congratulations on the new role.
Thank you, Parker.
Yeah, how have the past few months been for you guys? Are you're transitioning well? How does that feel?
We feel well taken care of. We've moved into the parsonage or the general secretary's apartment, and we were able to get our stuff up from Italy before Germany closed things down on December 10th. So that allowed us to set up over the holidays. And we started language school 3 weeks ago. We're pretty excited about learning German. And
you want to show off that German a little bit for us?
Ich heiße Tim. Ich wohne in Frankfurt am Dachsberg. Yeah,
that sounded a little Italian-German mix. I don't know.
It might be. It could very well be.
Who knows what languages we're speaking anymore?
That's right. That's right. Well, I'm certainly a long way to go.
How do you feel like you're transitioning to the new role? Is it exciting, comfortable, challenges?
It's been exciting. I've realized that stepping into a new role, following someone who was here for 18 plus years, that I'm a future focused, let's get going kind of person, but I need to ease in. But because of Corona times, there's not a whole lot of rushing around we can do. We've had to cancel some of our big IBC things this year. And so I feel like the transition is going well. Just very grateful for our IBC family and the people I get to work with. So very, very happy.
Right. So it is a new role. You're coming from spending a long time in Italy, missionary, church planting, and now you're stepping into a role of pastoring pastors. How do you think God has prepared you for this? Is a unique position to step into this?
Well, when I grew up in America in churches that had over 150 years of history. And so I had no idea what it was like to plant a church, start a new congregation, all those dynamics that I learned in a different culture. So church planting, all of those things I learned overseas, watching a lot of first generation Christians come to Christ. But in my role as a missionary, it was important that I not only be able to be productive, right, in some ways in my time of ministry, but that I leave the church in a place of long-term sustainability. And so this whole idea of training up people from day one who would take our place became a real focus of ours. And we recognized that as I grew in my own confidence and competency in the ministry, everything that I was discovering and saying, wow, okay, I feel a little bit more like I can handle some more things now and grow. I have to be able to transmit that on to somebody else. And so it's really given me a sensitivity and yet remembering my roots. And so I have a sense in which we ought to be calling up a lot of people and keeping them moving forward, helping them to see how they're going to grow and develop. And particularly with our leaders, they need to know that there is more growth to come. There's more understanding, and there's someone there to support them, encourage them.
Right. So that, I guess that idea of reproducing leaders and leaving things that had always been something that you had been important to you, and that now is carrying over to the whole convention. It's no longer just about sort of one church and making sure that church, but now you have that responsibility for kind of the family of churches that we're a part of.
Yes, I feel like that's a unique opportunity we have. we kind of lament that we pastor parades,
Yeah.
and we not only pastor parades, but our pastors themselves are very transitional. And so we have 15 churches right now. About a quarter of our churches are looking for their next pastor. So you talk about that level of change, and you wonder, can we ever build something? Can we invest in something with the hope that we're going to get some return on it in the future? And yet I believe that we can. I think if we can put into our culture a sense of developing others, that we will eventually reap the fruit of that, and then we'll be able to bring more stability and sustainability to our churches. And so this whole idea of pastoring pastors, for me, also leads in that direction. More stability in our leaders means more stability for our churches.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess kind of pursuing that thought a little bit about pastoring pastors. And so that's your role right now, but sometimes pastors can be a hard bunch to pastor. They're used to being pastors. They're used to being shepherds that are watching after sheep, and they have that role, and they don't always see themselves as the sheep who need
That's
to
right.
have a pastor looking after them. And sometimes there can be a lot of reasons for that. Sometimes we're a proud bunch, but do you find that most pastors that you interact with are wanting to be pastored and are open to kind of confessing that need?
Well, I don't know that they confess the need right away, but I would say that I perceive that they appreciate it. I've started just calling every week, calling up some pastors, and I've already been warned, you're going to have a hard time getting into their schedules. They're busy people. They might not have a lot of a time, but I'll tell you, so far, and maybe it's just because I'm new, but they're happy to have someone who calls up and says, "How are you doing?
Yeah.
Tell me something about yourself. Tell me about life right now." Um, I know myself, when someone asks me, "How are you?" I'm used to asking that question. Like you said, I'm used to asking other people that question. Sometimes it can almost be a little bit embarrassing because I feel the attention on myself. And I think there is a pride aspect in that too. But um, there is a desire we all have for relationship and friendship. And I think our pastors, in particular, our leaders, sometimes can feel like they don't have that in their own churches.
Hmm.
And so Jackie and I, if we can be that for them in some ways, I think that is a need that they have.
Right. I mean, that it can be that kind of complicated relationship because in your church as a pastor, you have people that you love. They're your community. They're your family. They're your friends, right? But there's also but you have a specific role in that relationship, right? You're a pastor, and so that comes with it some nuances to kind of how that relationship goes that may make it difficult to receive pastoring in that relationship. Do you think that sort of this outside perspective is sometimes necessary for people who are in that kind of shepherding mode all of the time?
Yeah, I think the outside perspective is particularly helpful, because if you tell me that your budget's trending in the wrong direction and
Right.
you're wondering whether you're going to have to close your doors in 6 months, I'm going to take that and say, okay, let's talk about that. But I don't have a lot of skin in that game. For you to say that to your church, to a church
Right.
person,
Exactly. Yeah. That's a
even to
sensitive
your
topic.
elder board, it
Yeah.
might be a little too much.
Yeah.
Or for you to even share your own doubts about yourself. I'm not sure about my fitness in ministry, or I'm struggling a little bit with depression right now, or I'm wondering if there's a, an expiration date on my ministry here. To be able to just talk openly about things like that without people jumping to conclusions, thinking you made decisions or whatever, I think an outside perspective can be particularly helpful in those instances.
Yeah. I know it has been for me. And at the same time, like just examining kind of how I relate to this, uh, those perspectives are sometimes needed, but I'm not always very conscious at the time that I need it. Like
Sure.
you understand what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
I'm kind of swimming in the sea and doing my best to stay afloat. But it never occurred to me that someone could throw me a life vest and help me.
Yeah.
Is there dangers of kind of neglecting this need? And is there any symptoms that maybe even it might be a willing thing? I'm talking about something I'm unconscious of, but maybe I'm just willingly not wanting to get input. Are there any dangers or symptoms that might reflect these kind of thoughts?
Well, I I told you before we jumped on here, I was this morning, it's just uncanny sometimes, but in my Bible reading, I was in Exodus 17 and 18. And you have in Exodus 17, Moses has to keep his arms up in order to win the battle with Amalek. And God provides Aaron and Joshua to be there to help him hold up his arms. And so he's had this tangible reminder that you can't do this alone. You're too weak. You can't keep your arms up. You need other people. And then the next chapter is about his father-in-law showing up, and Moses is out trying to judge every single issue that's happening with a million people,
For a million
right?
people in the desert, yeah.
And his father-in-law says to him in verse 17, the thing you're doing is not good. You're surely going to wear out both yourself and these people who are with you, for the task is too heavy for you. You cannot do it alone. And I think, there's something in us, and pride, I'm not sure what it is, but we feel that tremendous weight of responsibility for ourselves, for God's people, for the calling maybe in our lives. And sometimes we're in there and we just think this is just ministry. It's just supposed to be heavy. It's just supposed to be, some days it's just slug it out. Let's get through this week, there are better days ahead. And I think sometimes we do need somebody who can say, what you're doing is not good.
Yeah.
Because if you wear yourself out, you're going to be no good for yourself or for anybody. And
Yeah.
that makes no sense. That's not God's will for your life.
Yeah. And I can often relate to Moses in that scenario. He's got a million people to take care of. And yeah, I think there's a pride aspect to not asking for help, but I also think there's sort of a guilt aspect of, yeah, I'm helping these people, but I haven't even started to help these people over here. And
Sure.
you feel like, those people also need help. And so the tasks that you're doing is unending, and it's always going to be more than you can actually do. I get
Exactly.
more suggestions than I know what to do with. I get emails of everybody wanting me to do everything, not just from my church, but from outside the church.
Absolutely.
Right. And there's more resources being offered to me than I ever have time to look through. Um, and I feel guilty sometimes because it's like, okay, how can I respond to all of this?
Yeah.
And sometimes you need the outside person to come in and say, you can't, that's not what you're doing is not good. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah. That is yeah, I can certainly relate to Moses. And this one reason why I've been thankful for the IBC. I have had those outside perspectives, and they tend to be very there when I need them. Because I might go for a while without the perception that I'm sinking, then all of a sudden realize, oh, I really could use some coaching in this, or I really could use a pick me up. Or, I mean, my wife and I were extremely touched with not only from the response from my church, but also from IBC pastors and these kind of things when Kyra had COVID. It was just we were receiving an overflow of support, and that was just really touching. And I think, it's a reflection on kind of what the IBC has become in terms of a family.
Mhm.
I think that's really encouraging. Now, back to saying that, back to pastoring pastors. What is the biggest challenge to this task? What like if you're pastoring a pastor, how is that different than pastoring a layperson in your church who's a church member? What are there unique aspects to that?
Yeah, I think pastors are used to thinking that they're the one that's not allowed to say, I need a break, or I'm burning out, or I'm, uh, everyone else can let's say everyone else can say they need a break or they're going to resign or they're going to whatever, but the
Right.
pastor feels this sense of I've got to be in there and I've got to hang in there. um
Right. You just can't say, I'm not going to go to church today.
right. It's so compelling. It's part of our calling, and it's what keeps us in there. And so I think for this challenge can be the fact of saying, but you do need to be attuned to your own needs. It's okay to receive care for yourself. It doesn't mean that you are ready to throw in the towel, or you need to go to see a psychiatrist or psychologist or something, or things are really in bad shape. It just should be something normative in our lives, that we could have people checking in on us and we have a place to go. I
Right.
see that as my role in helping to bring the conversation to the table.
Yeah. Well, and we just had that training, was it yesterday, which is something that other IBC, Daryl, for example, has done it with me. But this idea of the peace index, which was really helpful to we can't go into the whole thing, but the point behind it is helping the person you're talking to examine their peace level. How at peace are you with your life?
Right.
And that is, I think that's really key, because sometimes you're so being Moses, and you're thinking about making a million judgments, and you haven't actually stopped to ask yourself, are you at peace?
Right.
And that kind of, I think it's unique for pastors in that kind of way. Um, yeah. So you're well equipped for the job you're doing. It's one that you feel like God has kind of prepared you for and led you to, uh, and one you're embracing. How do you anticipate having joy in the role that you're having? Pastoring pastors, new perspective. What are the joys you anticipate, and how do you see this in terms of a kind of a full kingdom advancement type of ministry?
Yeah. Well, the joy in my job is not going to be the administrative part of it, or those kinds of things. I'm a people person, so just I'm really looking forward to these relationships. For me, I have a unique window into the lives of leaders in an association of churches. I come into this role not having been an association guy.
Right.
So I ask a lot of ideological questions. Why do we need an association?
Mhm.
Biblically, what role does an association play in the lives of churches? And I think that one of the big answers is this one: pastor the pastors.
Mhm.
And so for me, I find a tremendous amount of energy in that whole idea that I have this little congregation, 120 people, leaders and wives. And guess what? They happen to be the leaders of churches, but it scales it down to a feasible level for me to say, I'm going to begin to build relationships with this group of people, and I'm going to begin to pour into their lives, because I think ministry happens exponentially,
Mm.
when we pour into the lives of others and they pour into the lives of others. And so that energizes me in a tremendous way just when I think of that vision. And the other thing is, I just feel like a Barnabas with my personality. And so one of the phrases that's really resonated with me in recent years is that my fruit grows on the trees of others. And
Mm.
I really love it when I see fruit growing on someone's tree, and I realize that in some way God used me to, you know, help them maybe find a resource, or encourage them when they were down, or connect them to somebody else they needed to meet in order for kingdom collaboration to happen. Though that's what really fills my sails. And so I just look forward to my interaction with the leaders of the IBC, because I know that God goes before me and he prepares those opportunities.
Yeah, I would definitely give testimony to that, both kind of in the past and in the present. Like, I was 35 and naive when I took over as pastor, and I made a lot of mistakes, but I think, the training, the role, Jimmy's role, and now your role, the training that I received at all of the conferences, Daryl Evans, and people like this, Bob Marsh, who have coached me, the different things I've been allowed to be a part of. There's no doubt I'm a much much better leader at this point than I was when I started, and probably the biggest factor in that is training that I've gotten from the IBC family. And it's not something that I sort of anticipated when I took over, that
Mhm.
that I was going to really be a lifeline for me. Yet that's what it has turned out to be. And so there is a sense in which, how did you put it? Your fruit is growing on someone else's tree. Like there is a sense in which, Jimmy's and Daryl's and Bob's and your fruit has been growing at Emmanuel International Church in Paris, even though you really don't see it. You haven't,
Right.
and so I think that is part of the power of a family of churches. And then, the shoes that you're stepping in to fill as well, that you're going to have uh, this I don't know, cultivating type of ministry that is in the IBC is a global ministry. It's going to have impact all over the world.
Mhm.
Yeah. Is there any maybe stories or that we can close on in terms of exciting things that are happening in the convention that you'd want to mention, or opportunities that you would want to share with a pastor who might be new and want to know more about how they can get involved?
Well, I think there are a lot of exciting things happening in the convention because the people that you and I get to work with are servants of Christ, and
Yeah.
they're committed disciple makers. Jackie and I were visiting the Martin family. They kind of adopted us for Christmas. We couldn't go back to be with our own kids in the States. And they had a German service, the first German service of the Church of Cologne. And
David Martin's family.
David
I got
Martin's
confused
family,
with Jimmy.
not Jimmy Martin,
Yeah,
not Jimmy
David. Yeah,
Martin. Sorry, yeah.
yeah. Mhm.
And it was so exciting that night to see David Martin play the guitar. That was his role in that launch of this German congregation. And he told me later, these three guys, German guys in his church, who maybe haven't had a lot of responsibility up until now, but now that they're launching a German speaking congregation, they're right in the front lines. And he was telling me, man, if you knew where these guys were 3, 4, 5 years ago, and to see what they did tonight, it's just awesome.
Yeah.
Those are the kinds of things that are exciting. We have a number of residents right now in our churches
Hmm.
who are getting a chance to get their feet wet in ministry in a context where they have a mentor pastor, and they have a development pathway that's intentional, that will hopefully lead to some of them becoming future leaders of our churches.
Yeah.
And in some cases, I'm talking to pastors and they're saying, maybe this guy will take my place. And that's so exciting to hear us talk about intentional succession planning in
Hmm.
the IBC. To me, that bodes very well for the future of our churches.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there are some sad situations. You talked about 35-year-old Parker. I've had a couple young IBC pastors in the last couple of weeks, and I've just listened to them, sympathetic. They've had some hard learning lessons, some real strong critique come at them. And with this desire to say, what do we need to learn in this season so that this doesn't keep happening? Are these patterns in our lives that we need to change? Are they blind spots in our leadership? And that encourages me as much as what the other two examples I gave you, because I know in my own life, there was a point when I was around 40 that the trajectory of my life was not headed in an encouraging direction. And the investment of a guy inviting me into a group for a year changed the whole trajectory of my future.
Mm.
And we could say part of why I'm here today and doing what I'm doing. And so to recognize that God might bring me into someone's life at a moment where it's crucial, and it could help make the difference between them packing it in and heading out, getting discouraged, or saying, hey, I learned a few things and they were hard, painful lessons, but boy, I don't want to go back and do that again. And then they continue to grow in their confidence and enthusiasm, and they're able to help then younger guys who come behind them.
Yeah. Well, one thing is for sure, it is hard to be a pastor.
It is.
It is a very hard job. But I think the encouraging thing is, I mean, the Lord that we serve gives us the strength, and oftentimes that strength does come from the Lord working through people like you, who are sitting us down and meeting with us for a year, like you said.
Yeah.
That that the Lord knows what we need as pastors, and the support, especially in our convention, God has provided. God has prepared you, which is what we've talked about earlier. And now, and if He's prepared you, that's also, a gift to us, because you're in that role now. And so any preparation that the Lord has given you is meant for you to use to benefit the convention. And so, we are thankful that you are in this role, and that we have a pastor looking out for us as well. So thank you, Tim, for joining us. Any parting words before we close out?
Well, you just struck a strong note for me, and that is that whole stewardship idea. I don't know why or when recently it's just come clear to me that, it's all about making the church the hero. We sometimes in leadership, we think it rises and falls on us, and we feel to use a word that my colleague used to use, indispensable. But to recognize that God places people in local churches for a season, whether it's the leader, whether it's the people in the church, or whether it's me as a GS of this convention, but just to recognize that all of us together are stewarding God's work.
Right.
He's here. He was here before us. He'll be here when we're gone. And so in the meantime, like you said, we pull together. We're here for each other. God uses us to minister, bearing one another's burdens. So for me, I'm super excited and love the family that I'm a part of, and just real grateful for this.
One of the phrases I often say in my church is, I need the Jesus in you just as much as you need the Jesus in me. And that's the beauty of this family, is that we're, at the end of the day, we're just sharing Jesus with each other. And so that's a beautiful thing. Well, that'll do it for today then. Thank you so much, Tim, for joining us on the podcast. And we'll see you next time. Thank you, and God bless.